Today it's the Christmas jumper turn of the festive giraffe, often neglected in the telling of the story of the birth of Jesus. Why a giraffe? Well, giraffes are related to camels, even though their ancestors diverged genetically about 50 million years ago. And of course we know with certainty that there are camels in the story, so the giraffe is an entirely reasonable addition to the story. Today's episode is about lineage, after all, about why the writers of the stories and our reading of them makes the descent of Jesus from the Jewish King David really important somehow. So there will be no talk of giraffe discrimination amongst yourselves or in the video comments. It's basically a camel from 49,998,000 years before the birth of Jesus. I'll also share some thoughts on the strongly claimed Old Testament prophecies of Jesus, and not just of his birth. Do they give legitimacy to the story as it unfolds? Do they feed off something else going on in us as human beings, whether Bible writers, editors into their final form, translators into English as we have it today, or us as we read it this year and every year? If you haven't watched episode 1 or 2 yet, you can dive straight in here, but watching them first will give you some background to the series and our head scratching about the virgin birth in episode 2. You can view them by clicking on this link here now, or on the link at the end of this video. You'll also then be able to track the amazing Christmas jumper parade so far, which I like to think of as some kind of vastly underwhelming advent calendar experience. So, lineage. Matthew chapter 1 has been called the sexiest chapter in the Bible. There's a lot of the father of, or if you're reading an older translation, there's a lot of begatting. It begins with the words, an account of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then it traces his male line from Abraham to Joseph through 3 periods of Israel's history, with 14 generations in each, totaling 42 generations. There's undoubtedly some symbolic significance to the symmetry of that, but I'm not going to go into that here. There are also 4 women mentioned in the lineage, which is unusual in a Jewish lineage. Tamar, Rahab, Ruth, and the wife of Uriah. And their inclusion is interesting. They're all significant figures in the Old Testament, though their stories get twisted because they're uncomfortable. All 4 offer their bodies to men in some way to gain security or safety. Tamar was previously married to 2 of the sons of Judah, but both sons died. Judah refused to give her to his 3rd son in marriage, which was the custom, believing her somehow cursed. So Tamar fathers twin boys by Judah, having tricked him into thinking she was a prostitute on the road. And when he wanted her killed because she's pregnant, and that's scandalous for his house, she reveals that he is the father. Rahab is a Gentile woman. She's also called a prostitute in the Hebrew scriptures, though some prefer to soften that in the telling of the story to innkeeper, which is not a thread we should pull through into nativity plays. She offers refuge to 2 Jewish spies, sent into Jericho before the city is defeated and everyone is slaughtered, in exchange for the life of her family. In some Jewish traditions, she married Judah, who was leading the nation of Israel. In Matthew's genealogy, her husband's name was Salmon, but spelt Salmon, and I just wonder what nicknames he would have been given in an English-speaking playground today. The book of Ruth tells her story, very briefly, but it's very nuanced, and it is often read as an almost Disney story of a noble man who stoops to marry a foreign peasant woman, when there are other ways of reading the story that are about power and vulnerability. And the wife of Uriah is mentioned in the Matthew Gospel as such, the wife of Uriah. But her name was Bathsheba, a name that has been used pejoratively in English to describe a woman as using her beguiling beauty to ensnare men. And William Blake bears some responsibility for this. The original story goes firmly in the other direction. King David sees her bathing. He's up on the roof, looks down, and somehow sees her bathing, is overcome with lust, summons her, and sleeps with her. And there's she clearly had little choice. She falls pregnant. He tries to get her husband to come away from military service to sleep with her so that the baby is believed to be his. He refuses. He's a solid soldier. And David then has him sent to the battlefront, where his death is almost certain. He dies. David marries her. Their son is Solomon. Why dwell on these women? Well, who can say what the original authors intended by including them? There is some scandal with each in the way that their story is told, and has been retold and interpreted again and again down the years. But the men in the stories are objectively worse than our least kind view of these women. What is clear is that the writers of Matthew aren't that interested in the virtues, character or conduct of any of the men or women that are named, just in tracing a line to Jesus from Abraham through David. They do so with a single purpose: to show the fulfillment of an Old Testament passage that has come to be considered a watertight prophecy of the Messiah and his lineage. But more about prophecies later. Why does lineage matter? We must be careful, I think, not to look down too much on the insistence in Matthew and Luke's version that Jesus is descended from David. Matthew lays out the entire lineage, and we're quite sure that this version of the Jesus story is written for Jews to convince them of his status as Messiah. In Luke, it's a few words in a paragraph, in the only sentence that says anything about Joseph at all, really. Status today is about more than birthright or name, but status is a very real thing. And status in whatever form builds platforms for people to speak and to be heard. We listen to war correspondents who put their lives in danger and can speak first-hand of life on the ground in a war zone. We listen to scientists who've spent their lives researching issues that affect our lives when our lives are on the line. We listen to medical professionals when they speak about our health. I think some people listen to me, expecting me to have some particular insight, some specialist knowledge because of my training and experience. But we also do other things. Someone who's done the best job of eating bugs in the jungle on television is asked about their opinion on complex political events before they return to their work as an actor in a soap opera. No disrespect to their political views or their political engagement, but those questions do often seem oddly out of place. Premier League football managers were asked to comment on the validity of COVID restrictions. Members of the British royal family are lauded for simply talking to people like human beings, for riding bicycles, for playing table tennis, for putting on a tribal hat when visiting an indigenous culture group. In the Christmas story, have we elevated the Magi to kings for the same reason? Kings have more status. Their visit is more significant and indicative than one of visitors from an obscure tribe of wisdom figures reading signs in nature. Do we do that with all of the characters to an extent when relating our lives to their own? I talked about that in the last video a bit in relation to the physical experience of our bodies. Are we part of a pedestal building culture, however subtly so? Are we eager participants in it? Is that in the Matthew and Luke story in the first place, as a continuation of what it means to be human? Just like that. Inside the church, I've seen that in the presence of Anglican bishops and archbishops in this country. In Methodism there is some pedestaling of presidents and vice presidents of our annual conference and those who have been so before. I remember a student at the University of York addressing St. Tamu when he was Archbishop of York by his first name, saying something like, "Hi John, how's it going?" There were audible gasps from other students. The Archbishop seemed to welcome it. Why does Jesus need pedigree? We can perhaps see why it matters to the authors of Matthew and their audience, but why does it matter still? And what does that say about our ongoing habit of building and assigning pedestals to human beings? Maybe we're not that confident. Maybe it lets us off the hook in all kinds of ways when others are clearly greater than ourselves. Maybe that's why we like Jesus being descended from Abraham through David. We can't be like him because we're far from pedigree stock. And so, with a Christmas giraffe, we move on to prophecies, which create the need for the genealogy in the first place. On the website newtestamentchristians.com, there is a meticulous list of 351 prophecies of Jesus in the Bible, with the verses of the original prophecy and the verses that show its fulfillment in the New Testament. That's the longest list I could find, and I applaud the exhaustive work and the enthusiasm to do it. But I do wonder why that work is undertaken. We're not going to look at any of the prophecies in any detail. The lists are there for you to find, confidently asserted, confidently believed, proven. But there are some questions to ask about prophecies that extend far beyond words on pages. Here are some of mine. If God directed these writers to say something to write about something else, when really they were writing about Jesus, what does that say about God? Many of the passages make sense in their own context. In fact, they all do. But they've also been grasped as the foretelling of the future in a way that would have been completely ignorant of the original authors. That feels a bit weird, to me at least. Why would God use people in that way without them knowing? Maybe you think that they did know, believing that is not a matter of fact, but an act of faith in an accepted certainty about prophecies in this way. It's not wrong, but it does involve choice. The central question when it comes to prophecies relates directly to 4 words that Christians say often in various forms, in conversation, in song, in forms of words used in church services. And those words are, God is in control. If we believe that the prophecies of Jesus are just that, they are prophecies of a specific set of events and moments and a person that is to come, then we are saying that God has a script already prepared, in some cases with great detail. And then we must wonder how much choice human beings in those stories actually have. I heard someone once muse, I wonder how many women the angel Gabriel went to before he found Mary, who said yes. Oh, I like that question. And again, this is sort of common church language, if God's purposes cannot be thwarted, how is that an expression of relationship? We won't touch on the huge question of human and planetary suffering that is raised by the phrase, God is in control, though that is a necessary question that I will do my best to address in other videos. Just in our reading of the Christmas story each year, we read confidently that prophecies have been fulfilled. The original authors need that, in their own contexts and with the beliefs and understandings that they have of cause and effect, God as an active agent in human history and the present moment, and the solid library of Old Testament passages that for them already clearly anticipate a Messiah in the way they read them, and then those passages added to that pile by the unfolding story of Jesus as we read on from the beginnings of Christmas. Christmas for Grownups is not trying to undermine faith in the story, as it is commonly held. Christmas for Grownups is about asking why we tell it the way that we do today, how we receive it, how we preserve its forms and meanings as it's been passed down, but also seeking to be honest about how we mash 2 very different stories together and then fill in lots of blank spaces with all kinds of certainty. Most importantly, what's going on in us as we do so? This week, what's going on in us still that is about a human culture of building pedestals and installing people on them? Apparent authority given to voices on the basis of celebrity or birthright or lineage. Those aren't quite as relevant today. The celebrity one is very real. But what are we doing, and why do we do that? The apparent comfort of believing that God has a plan, has always had some form of plan, arranged then and arranging still, signposts to that plan, and that it will all be all right in the end in our physical world. as invested as we are in our circumstances, perhaps more than in our deepest selves. If Jesus' lineage is from David, and the accuracy of Old Testament prophecy sits fully and comfortably in your faith, your ideas or experience of God, or both, then stay there. I'm not seeking to evict you from that place. You may find, though, that those beliefs are experienced as barriers to faithful inquiry for many outside or on the edge of your church community. If you've not been able to take Christianity, or faith, or the Bible, or church, or any combination of those seriously, because these questions are yours too, and maybe more questions than these, my hope is that you know your questions to be important, even necessary, and worthy of asking and exploring. You may not find a church community easily that wants to talk about these things meaningfully, or that even has a track record of doing so, but persevere. In person and online, there is room for you somewhere. If you want to contact me, my details are at the end of this video, along with the option to subscribe to my channel and see previous episodes. In time, I will be re-recording and publishing some of the material I prepared during the COVID pandemic, as well as working on some new projects I've had in mind for some time. And if you've made it this far, well done. The Giraffe and I applaud you. Thank you for watching. Share these videos with anyone who might find them helpful, or challenging, or both. Good conversation isn't always easy conversation. In the next and last video, shepherds and wise men, gifts and symbols, as well as a look at the profound differences between the two Christmas stories in the Bible. The Giraffe and I wish you well.